Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable to my lecturer, Mem Iin Mutmainah MPD. My name is Vahra Dilla Azzahra. In this video, I'm going to talk about the important point of chapter in second language acquisition. I will start from the chapter 1, Key Issues in Second Language Acquisition. Pada chapter ini, kita membahas apa saja yang menjadi key issues dalam second language acquisition. Second language acquisition versus first language acquisition. Second language acquisition is referring to the ability to acquire an additional language beyond the first language. SLA atau second language acquisition ini di mana kita memperoleh bahasa kedua kita di luar dari our first language. Contohnya yang sedang kita lakukan sekarang adalah acquire the second language, yaitu bahasa Inggris. Meanwhile, first language acquisition is the ability to acquire a mother tongue or first language. Ya, first language adalah bahasa pertama kita yang sangat kita acquire. Contohnya, kita dilahirkan di kota Palembang ini, dari kecil kita sudah sangat acquire atau terbiasa dengan bahasa Palembang sebagai bahasa pertama kita. Well, yang menjadi key issue dalam SLA versus first language acquisition adalah, if first language acquisition is so straightforward, why is learning a second language is so difficult? Okay, the next one is competence versus performance. According to Chomsky, 1965, competence is the mental representation of linguistic rules, which constitute the speaker-hearer's internalized grammar. Otherwise, performance is the comprehension and production of language. Kompetensi ini adalah kemampuan yang ada di dalam diri kita, sedangkan performance, skill yang kita produce atau kita hasilkan. Yang menjadi key issue di competence versus performance ini adalah apakah kompetensi yang kita punya sama dengan performance yang dihasilkan. Well, the next is acquisition versus learning. Acquisition is picking up a second language through exposure and it's unconscious. Learning is conscious study of a second language. Acquisition ini terjadi secara tidak sadar, sedangkan belajar atau learning itu terjadi secara sadar. Okay, the next is the role of the first language. Well, ada asumsi kuat bahwa sebagian besar kesulitan yang dihadapi pelajar L2 disebabkan oleh L1-nya. Proses ini disebut dengan transfer bahasa. Dan this study of these differences is called constructive analysis. And the last is individual learner differences. Setiap learner itu mempunyai perbedaan dengan learner yang lain. Factors that may make learning differences there are aptitude, motivation, age, cognitive style, personality, and etc. Well, the summary of this chapter is there are 5 key issues in SLA. The first one is situational factors, and the second is linguistic input, learner differences, and then learner processes, and the last is linguistic output. Okay, I will continue to the next chapter, chapter 2, the role of the first language. There is a popular belief that second language acquisition is strongly influenced by the learner's first language atau L1. Jadi ada asumsi bahwa SLA ini sangat dipengaruhi oleh first language-nya si learner. Dan the role of the L1 in SLA is negative one. Dan peran L1 di SLA ada yang negatif, yaitu L1 menghalangi atau mengganggu pembelajaran di L2. Seperti pada fitur L1 transfer ke L2. Okay, behaviorist theory dominated both psychology and linguistics in 1950s. The first one is habits. Habits that happen when different stimuli produces different responses from a learner. There are two important characteristics of habit. The first one is observable, or the action that could be observed, and then automatic, it performed spontaneously without awareness. And then the learning of habit could occur through imitation, di mana learner copies the stimulus behavior sufficiently often for it to become automatic. Si learner mengimitasi habit tersebut secara berulang-ulang sehingga menjadi otomatis. And the second one is reinforcement, where the learner is rewarded depending on whether it is appropriate or otherwise. And then errors were considered undesirable. They were evidence of non-learning, of the failure to overcome proactive inhibition. The predict areas of potential error there are classroom practice and then having examined. Contrastive analysis hypothesis. Contrastive analysis is a way of comparing languages in order to determine potential error for ultimate purpose of vitality. Contrastive analysis ini adalah cara membandingkan bahasa tersebut untuk menentukan potential errornya. Tujuan utama dari contrastive analysis adalah untuk memprediksi area yang mana yang sulit dan yang mana yang mudah bagi learners. And then psychological aspect. There are two positions those developed with regard to psychological aspect. The first one, two constructive analysis. The first one is strong hypothesis, and then weak hypothesis. The strong version maintained that one could be prediction about learning and hence about the success of language teaching materials based on a comparison between two languages. The weak version starts with an analysis of learners' recurring errors. It begins with the learners do and then attempts to account for those errors on the basis of native language target language differences. And then linguistic aspect. Most of contrastive analysis studies carried out have been based on surface structure characteristics, such as those described by the structuralist. The process followed was description, or a formal description of the two languages is made, and then selection, certain items, comparison, the identification of areas of difference and similarity, and then prediction, for example, identifying which areas are likely to cause error. And the last is types of error. Dilla and Burt, 1973, they identified 4 types of error according to their psycholinguistic origin. The first one is interference-like error. The second is first language development error. The third one is ambiguous error. And the fourth is unique error. Okay, the next chapter is chapter 3, interlanguage and the natural role of development. The term interlanguage was first used by Selinker 1972. Interlanguage referred to the structure system which the learner at any given stage in his development. Interlanguage focused on its 3 principal features. They are language learner, language is permeable. The L2 language learner's interlanguage system is permeable in the sense that rules that constitute the learner's knowledge at any one stage are not fixed, but are open to amendment. And the second is language learner, language is dynamic. The two learners' interlanguage is constantly changing. The last is language learner, language is systematic. mentalist theory, L1 acquisition was the product of an acquisition device, by which means the child related a set of universal grammatical rules to the surface structure of the language he was learning. Mentalist view of L1 acquisition posits the following: language is a human-specific faculty. Language exists as independent faculty in human mind. The primary determinant of L1 acquisition is the child's acquisition device. The acquisition device atrophies with age. The process of acquisition consists of hypothesis testing. Okay, the summary of this chapter is the common issue which concern in interlanguage is the learner difficult to understand language structure of L2 because it different with their L1. Jadi kesulitan para learner untuk mengerti structure L2 karena perbedaannya dengan L1 mereka. Interlanguage refers to the structure system by which the learners construct any given stages in his development. So there are many steps of development passed by the learners in comprehending the structure form in L2. The chapter 4 is about variability in interlanguage. Interlanguage co-varies with linguistic context. Interlanguage variation is an indication of learner's stage of acquisition. Learner's style shifts in the L2 in the same way their style shift in the L1. Interlanguage co-varies with the task that learners are performing. There are multiple factors that influence interlanguage variation. Okay, look at this figure. This is about interlanguage variability. There are systematic variability and non-systematic variability. Systematic variability consists of individual variability and contextual variability. And then contextual variability consists of linguistic context and situational context. And then non-systematic variability, this consists of two. The first one is free variability and then performance variability. Okay, now the last chapter is about individual learner differences and second language acquisition. SLA acknowledges that there are individual differences in L2 acquisition. These differences are psychological. According to Alice 1985, these differences were categorized into personal factors and general factors. Personal factors consist of group dynamics, attitude to the teacher and learning materials, individual learning techniques. And then general factors consist of age, aptitude, personality, cognitive style, motivation, and intelligence. The first one is aptitude. Aptitude is a natural ability for learning in L2. It is believed to, in part, related to general intelligence. It is thought to predict success in learning. There are two components of aptitude. The first one is phonemic coding ability, yaitu the ability to identify sounds of a foreign language, atau kemampuan untuk mengidentifikasi suara bahasa asing, so that they can be remembered that later. And the second is grammatical sensitivity, the ability to recognize the grammatical function of words in sentence, atau kemampuan untuk mengenali fungsi dari grammar di dalam kalimat tersebut. And then inductive language learning ability, the ability to identify patterns of correspondence and relation between form and meaning. Rote learning ability, the ability to form and remember association between stimuli. Motivation. Motivation involves that the attitude and affective states that influence the degree of effort that learners make to acquire an L2. There are several types of learning strategy. The first one is cognitive strategy. The strategies that are involved in the analysis, synthesis, or the transformation or learning materials. And then metacognitive strategy. The strategies involved in planning, monitoring, and evaluating learning. Social or affective strategy. It involves the way in which learners choose to interact with other speakers. Well, that's all about my explanation. Thank you so much for your attention and thank you so much for watching. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.